13 states that deals with both animals and plants. So we deal with quite a lot of state-listed rare plants as well. Most of what we do, I would say, in the eyes of the public, is motherhood and apple pie. You restore bald eagles, and everybody loves you. Turn around and suggest you're going to do something for a rattlesnake, it isn't quite the same response. If you look at American fears, you Google what people are afraid of, worldwide, snakes is number one. And that includes claustrophobia and fear of heights. Snakes, usually in most surveys, is number one. In the Gallup poll for the U.S., snakes is by far number one. And spiders is the only other animal that rates fairly high. Grizzly bears, mountain lions, great white sharks, they don't even come close. It's snakes that are right on top, before claustrophobia, fear of heights. And so probably 60% of the U.S. population has some level of fear of snakes. So add on to that, we're talking about trying to restore or protect a poisonous snake. And some people are not only frightened by the idea, but they're absolutely angered and militant and really disapproving of why would you ever want to do that. And I would say we have two poisonous snakes in Massachusetts, the Timber Rattlesnake and the Copperhead, northern Copperhead. Copperhead is not nearly as large or as venomous or as often seen or as iconic as a rattlesnake with a big rattle. So people don't think of copperheads much, but rattlesnakes are really the only state-listed rare species that's persecuted even today. It's been illegal to kill one for 30-plus years, and still it's illegally persecuted. By not everybody, but enough population that we're having a very hard time maintaining them. So let me see if we can move forward. I'm going to try to be finished by 11:45, so I'm going to be clock watching. So we'll have time for some questions. But like I say, most of what we do is sort of motherhood and apple pie, but not this. So we try to be science-driven. We try not to work on species that are just popular, but the species that need it. And our agency's mission, use my pointer here, is to restore, conserve, manage all wildlife resources of the Commonwealth. And so we try to look at it at a scientific point of view, not an emotional point of view or a popularity point of view. And interestingly, it shouldn't be really a surprise, but the most common cause of endangerment is loss of habitat. Habitat that's built up, or habitat that's overtaken by invasive species, that sort of thing. We own over 200,000 acres that we manage specifically for wildlife. And the Department of Environmental Conservation, which is more the recreation end of state government, they own more than twice what we do. Even still, you figure if that's like 600,000 plus acres, more than 500,000, it's still in the grand scheme of things just a drop in the bucket. So the very fact that loss of habitat is the #1 cause of endangerment for species in general, not only in mass but around the world, we do what we can, but that's not enough. So we also regulate what others can do on private land as well. And we have a regulatory review staff. So my program is this natural heritage and endangered species part of the agency. We have a fisheries part and a wildlife part that deals with the waterfowl and deer and things that are harvested. But ours are the non-traditional species. I wish it was a little darker in here because it's hard to see some of these photos of really nice color. Everything from invertebrates, being insects, to freshwater mussels, to minnows that don't get more than 3 or 4 inches long, plants, that's Arethusa orchid, which is really gorgeous, the iconic bald eagle, the symbol of our nation, reptiles and amphibians, And in this category, we have timber rattlesnakes. Most people don't realize that the timber rattlesnake really has a long history in our state. It plays heavily in the history of our state and actually challenged the bald eagle in the early days as sort of representing our nation. So this story here is the first that I know about where the chief of the Narragansetts delivered, and this is just an artist's reconstruction, a bundle of arrows wrapped in the skin of a rattlesnake as a threat to Governor Winthrop, and not only a threat, but a challenge to war. The chief had a large contingent of warriors just outside of Plymouth waiting to engage. But Winthrop returned the skin, the rattlesnake skin, the quiver of arrows was wrapped in powder and shot, and basically called his bluff and nothing happened. But this was our first iconic sort of show of strength using the rattlesnake as a symbol. And then the "Don't Tread on Me," you look at this now and it has its own current, more modern meaning, but originally the Gaston flag was for the Continental Marines in the American Revolution. And so early on, rattlesnake was taken certainly as a symbol of strength. Whoop, what did I do? Let's see, that takes me there. Okay. The range of the timber rattlesnake has been dramatically affected. A couple of reasons. One is this is a fairly southern snake in its ecological affinities. So it moved this far north during a period of time around 5,000 to 8,000 years ago when the climate was a little bit warmer. And so of all of our snakes, we have probably, I guess, maybe about 15 species of native snakes. The timber rattlesnake and the copperhead, our only two poisonous ones, have the greatest southern affinities, and therefore they cannot successfully withstand our winters unless they get particularly deep underground, deeper than other snakes. And so they cannot hibernate just anywhere across the landscape. They require places that are talus slopes below cliffs, places where the glaciers plucked rocks off the southern downslope edge of outcrops and drop the boulders. So places they can get very deep, 20, 25 feet underground probably. And so because of that and the changing climate, they historically probably really did occupy this entire area, but as the climate cooled down from that warm period, as I say, 5,000 to 8,000 years ago, they were isolated in pockets that had these talus slopes and boulder fields and that sort of thing. So they were already disjunct and isolated. The populations isolated one from another even when the Pilgrims arrived. But when we went through the land clearing phase of colonization, they were persecuted. There was a bounty on them. You get paid for killing almost any predatory animal, rattlesnakes, but weasels and foxes and wolves and mountain lions and bobcats and crows and ravens. They were considered competitors to the early settlers, and they were all persecuted, almost all of which is really recovered. Rattlesnakes never disappeared, but we went from a fairly broad distribution in mass. No one knows exactly where how many colonies or den sites we originally had, but right now we're down to just a handful. 5 little, small, isolated populations, one of which was down to 8 individual animals, 1 adult female in the whole population. So, and in my career, we had 2 others that disappeared in the early part of my career. So this is a species really on the verge of disappearing from the state. And as I say, deliberate killing is unique for our state-listed endangered species. Occasionally somebody will shoot a bald eagle. Occasionally somebody will collect a rare turtle. But this is the only species really where a deliberate dislike or fear is driven illegal killing. And then road mortality, because our state, just think about our state, it is just dissected by a network of roads where the distance between one road and the next is very short. So the life of a snake A rattlesnake in particular, which may wander out a mile from where it spends the winter, is going to cross roads, just almost inevitably. So road mortality is another issue. But it's been unlawful to kill a rattlesnake since 1979. Same sort of problem we had with birds of prey. Birds of prey really were not fully protected until about the same time under the Federal Migratory Bird Treaty Act. They were added much later than the original act. So we still have problems with people shooting hawks, as an example. But rattlesnakes is even more pervasive. So as a result, on the northern edge of their range, where we have these disjunct populations because of the cooling of the North American continent and populations being left isolated at places where they could hibernate in deep sites, we have them listed as endangered in Mass, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, New Jersey, Ohio, and threatened in New York. So this whole northern tier of their range, they're really not doing well. They've been declining, they've been persecuted, and populations have really dropped. And they have been completely extirpated from Maine and Rhode Island. They used to occur in those two states. Maine and Rhode Island now are the only two states in the lower continental U.S. that have no rattlesnake species. Every other state in the whole continental U.S. has at least one. You go to Arizona, they have probably 25 species of venomous snakes, including about 10 rattlesnake species. I'm just pulling those numbers as sort of guesstimates, but probably Arizona has the greatest diversity of venomous snakes in the U.S. The Massachusetts Endangered Species Act, this is 130, Chapter 1, Massachusetts General Laws 131A is our Endangered Species Act. Not only says are they protected, but all agencies, departments, boards, and commissions and authorities shall utilize their authorities in the furtherance of the purposes of this chapter. So even our Department of Conservation is supposed to be doing what they can to protect rare species, be it rattlesnake or bald eagle, whatever. So when it comes to habitat, we do really have the assistance of other land-owning agencies. Yeah, I wish we didn't have so much light. A little hard to see the details here. But on top of this persecution, in recent years, we had the sudden emergence of a new disease. And so this snake fungal skin disease causes lesions. You can see on the side of the face of this one. Really, you need to, unfortunately, the lights to be down to see that this is a huge infection on the face of this one. And this one has huge infections on the face and a couple of down here. And when it sheds, the skin comes apart all broken up and thick. It's pussy, but that's the way they heal themselves. They shed their skin. So normally a rattlesnake would shed its skin maybe 4 times in a summer. When they're infected like this, they'll shed it maybe 6 times in a summer. Their physiology tries to kick in and help them clear themselves up. But this has shown up suddenly. It's a new emerging disease like we've had a lot of lately. White nose syndrome in bats. It's almost wiped out our bats. It's a European disease that's gotten over to North America. And so timber rattlesnakes in the Northeast, Massasauga rattlesnakes in the Midwest, pygmy rattlesnakes in the Southeast have been the snake species particularly impacted by this. So I actually was the author of a grant conserving snake species of greatest conservation need threatened by emerging fungal disease. I wrote this grant. I'd never really written a major grant before. $500,000. By golly, I got it. And so, yeah, that's cool. But it was because we had a very good need, a very strong need, and a very good plan. And I got a whole range of states across the range of the timber rattlesnake to coordinate. And it included, as you can see at the top, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Vermont, New Jersey, Tennessee, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois. Tennessee was sort of a control state. They didn't have the disease yet, and we wanted to compare what they were finding with what we were finding. But also partners, UMass in Amherst, Roger Williams Park Zoo down in Providence, Rhode Island, U.S. Geologic Survey's National Wildlife Health Center in Madison, Wisconsin. They did all the testing. They're a very sophisticated wildlife health lab. They're sort of the CDC for wildlife. They're the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, is to people what this is for wildlife. And then the Wildlife Conservation Society, which is a nonprofit, and the Orion Society, which was helping Vermont do their surveys, another nonprofit. So, got $500,000 for 2 years. And the idea was to go out and see how bad is this new emerging disease. Is this catastrophic? Turns out it was catastrophic for 2 timber rattlesnake populations, only one remaining in New Hampshire. And our easternmost, believe it or not, we have a timber rattlesnake and copperhead population within the Route 128 belt around Boston. Can you imagine? So you can look from Chickatawbut Hill and the Blue Hills, where they have rattlesnakes, to the city of Boston, and I think it's like 3.5 miles away. It's just really close. So amazing we still have rattlesnakes in a place like that. So the natural history of these animals, you think of snakes, they probably breed every year, and they don't live that long. It's actually quite surprising. They don't breed, the females, until they're 9 or 10 years old. So it takes them a long time to avoid a fox or a weasel eating them, or a red-tailed hawk or a hiker killing them. They have to be 10 years old, essentially, before they're old enough to have young. And then at this latitude, since we have such short summers, and these are somewhat southern affinity snakes, they can only breed once every 3 to 5 years. So they might have young one year. They might lose their clutch, and they're not going to do it again until 4 or 5 years later. And so through their entire lifespan, which is a lot longer than people realize, 40 years they'll live. I mean, they live, a fairly long lifespan for a small reptile. But in that time frame, they have an average of 9 young every 3 to 5 years. And they have total clutch losses oftentimes because of problems. So, their success in the entire lifespan of adult female, she may not produce all that many young. The size is always exaggerated. Oh, it was a 6-foot rattlesnake. Well, there are species, eastern diamondback, can get to be that big, rarely. But these guys, the males are 4 feet, females 3 feet. Absolute record is about 4.5 feet. So nowhere near the 5 and 6 feet people say. Normally with us, because they're so persecuted in Massachusetts, and because they never live anywhere near that 40 years, we're usually talking about big adults that are maybe 3 feet long. But still an impressive beast nonetheless. So one of the big questions is how much land do they need? How much space do they need? And the travel distance varies between ages and sexes, but for gravid females, they only go 1,000 feet or less. They don't go very far from where they hibernate. They're anchored to this hibernation site. Remember, I said it had to be uniquely deep. So that is their anchor. That's why they can't disperse across the landscape. They can't spread. They are anchored there. And the gravid females only go about 1,000 feet away from that or less. The adult females that aren't having young this year, a little over a mile or less. And the males can wander. They'll go 2.5 miles or less for the average adult male. But we have the absolute record of nearly 5 miles. And where here in Massachusetts can you get a spot that a snake travels 5 miles from it, it's not going to get in trouble. So any animal that really does that is going to encounter a car or some yard where it's very unwelcome. So the greatest limiting factor are those hibernation sites. These are sites that have to be uniquely deep. And what we're proposing to do, we have five remaining populations. As I say, one of them was down to 10 animals. It's now up to about 15 because we did some head raising of young, what we call head starting young, to get them up big enough that everything in the woods wouldn't eat them up. And we're starting to do some management. But all of these populations essentially are on public land that are open for public use. Hiking, the Blue Hills, Mount Tom, all are parks or state forests, and so we can't keep people away, and so you can't sit there and walk next to everybody and be sure they don't do something to hurt the snakes. Throw a rock on top of them, kill them if they cross trails. They're saying, everybody says, oh, I was defending myself. It's dangerous. Well, I can tell you, we've had a lot of rattlesnakes killed by people. We have not had a human die from a rattlesnake bite in this state since colonial times. Literally colonial times, where our records are very poor, and one of them we pick out of an old folk song, and we assume it's true, but that's our best evidence, is a folk song. So what we're trying to do is create one population in the state that we can protect from people. Not protect people from the snakes, but the snakes from people. So this is Quabbin Reservoir. This is a drinking water reservoir of Boston. And it's Swift River, the east and west branches of the Swift River, dammed up down here in Belchertown, I guess it is. And the largest island is this one right here. And it's got a causeway to the mainland, but it is an island, and it's 1,300 acres. And we figured a whole population of timber rattlesnakes requires at least 1,000 acres for a big, robust population. And their dispersal distance is generally going to be, we found there's a glacial boulder field I'll show you pictures of right here at the top of it. And dispersal distance would probably get the outliers down to about here. But if you get to that longest strain individual animal everywhere ever documented, it would get the animal about down to here. So it would get into the area potentially open to the public. But one animal maybe ever. So the main population would be stuck to here. Can they swim? Absolutely, they can swim. Would they? No, because they have to get back to that hibernation site. So here are the areas that are off limits to the public, and you can see the islands are. But the mainland that's not striped is open to public access. And so people have not taken well to this proposal. Here is the boulder field that we've chosen. Almost positive that it was historically a rattlesnake den site, but it would have been wiped out probably in the early 1800s, and we don't have good references. But 3 different similar boulder fields surrounding the reservoir called Rattlesnake Hill, Rattlesnake Ledge. Pretty convincing, and they are perfect rattlesnake hibernaculum sites. So they have to have deep places to hibernate. These are rare features on the landscape. They imprint at their hibernation site, so they spend the winter there. They go out and forage. They go different directions as different individuals. That becomes traditional for each individual, and they come back every fall. Some don't go far at all. Some go farther, but the majority of them stay within a fairly short distance, within half a mile or less of the hibernation site. And if they don't get back, they're not going to survive the winter. So this is absolutely critical to their survival, that they be able to get back to a big boulder field where they can go deep underground for hibernating in the winter. So here's just more shots of that. This is the north end of the island that we've chosen for the release site in Quabbin Reservoir, our drinking water reservoir. Off limits to the public already for drinking water supply security. So you go out there, people say, well, somebody will just go out there and kill them. Well, if they do, they're going to have a state police helicopter coming out looking for them. So I feel very comfortable that it's a lot safer than the Blue Hills, where anybody can walk. So the question is, people have asked, well, you're going to have to feed them because they're going to be on an island. Well, again, this is a huge island. It's over 1,000-acre island. And these guys, they sit in an ambush position oftentimes, waiting for a chipmunk to come across this log. And that animal will sit like that for 2 weeks, just waiting for that mouse or that chipmunk to cross that log and then pop. Their most popular food items are eastern chipmunk and the white-footed mouse. If they have a population, if we have an acorn crash, both of these species will be affected and might decline. they're happy to go for a thrush or an ovenbird or one of the other voles or mice that's not tied to acorns, redback vole, pine vole. And this snake will maybe eat 4 food items in the entire summer, so they don't require a lot of resources. And people have said, well, they're going to breed like rats and spread everywhere. Well, first of all, people keep ignoring the fact they're anchored to their hibernation site. They can't spread everywhere. Literally, there was an editorial in the Providence, Rhode Island newspaper by a professor, retired professor, who argued if we did this, Rhode Island would be overrun by rattlesnakes. Well, that's a long way to get from one hibernation site down to Rhode Island. And we already have 5 other rattlesnake populations in Massachusetts, 3 of which are closer to Rhode Island right now. So there's this hysteria, this irrational thinking and irrational arguments that are being made. But on this island, all of these species of predators occur. All of them will eat young rattlesnakes. And some of them not so small. I mean, these aren't rattlesnakes they have. That's a water snake. That's a black racer. That is a black racer. They eat baby rattlesnakes too. That's a milk snake. That is a water snake. So they a hawk or an eagle or a coyote, they don't know one snake from another. They don't know if it's poisonous or not. In fact, we just recently found a big timber rattlesnake in the Blue Hills dead, and about 50 feet away was a red-tailed hawk. Red-tailed hawk had killed it and started to rip it apart, but got bit on the lower leg and died about 50 feet away. So these predators are vulnerable to this too. So what we want to do, this is an adult female, and there's the head of a baby, and there's the head of a baby, and there's the head of a baby. They give birth to live young. We're taking young, and at Roger Williams Park Zoo, we're having them head started. Head started means grow them up to be bigger so they're not snack food for every predator in the forest, and use those to restore the population. Anybody know who Jeff Corwin is? Yeah, he's interested. He's done some filming of our project. This is Lou Perotti, the herp curator, the reptile curator at Roger Williams Park Zoo. And do you think they're proud of what they're doing to try to help us? That's the side of their building down at Roger Williams Park Zoo. This is where they head start the baby timber rattlesnakes that we've been trying to pull together for this. And this is an adolescent timber rattlesnake. So we have this plan for Roger Williams Park Zoo to head start for two summers, snakes until they're almost 2 feet long, and release them at the hibernation site in the spring when it's cold enough that at night they have to go down into the hibernacula, and they come out during the day to bask, and then eventually disperse from there. So that's where they start. They will be imprinted on that is their hibernacula to come back to, and we have no doubt that this will work just fine, establishing a population on this island out of public reach. Now, normally, when we do wildlife projects, no one asks us a question. In this case, we're getting interrogated big time. This is, how can you possibly do this? So the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Advisory Committee is 14 people from around the state with knowledge in science. We first passed it by them. They thought it was a great idea. The Fisheries and Wildlife Board is our regulatory board for the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. They were fine with it. And it hadn't happened overnight. This started in 2013, and we're already down to 16, and we're still in the planning stages. But it's one of these things that the internet made go viral. We were doing this for all this planning, all this talking for over 2 years, and suddenly one person put out a sort of a missile of an email that went to legislators and, what idiot's idea was this? Don't they know rattlesnakes will breed like rabbits and put everyone in their state in jeopardy? And the politicians jumped all over it. And so suddenly, We had a public forum. We had about 230 people show up, and I'll show you pictures in a minute. A legislative oversight committee, the legislator, the chair of the Environment Committee, it's a bigger, longer title for the committee, is one of those people that's afraid of snakes. And so she was outraged that we would produce more snakes in the state. I don't think it really even mattered to her that it was rattlesnakes, just snakes, because she's very afraid of snakes. And so we got brought into that, and then the River Watershed Advisory Committee, which advises on the uses of Quabbin. We presented there, and the Quabbin Watershed Advisory Committee. So suddenly this project, unique to all wildlife projects we've ever done, is getting heavy scrutiny and a lot of criticism and a lot of efforts to stop us. The talk show radio media has been scathing. The newspapers have, for the most part, been scathing until you get to the editorials. And they're coming in not so bad. So 230 people in Orange at the high school, and I gave a presentation that actually surprised me. 60% of the U.S. public are afraid of snakes. Only 20% in the audience were opposed to the project. And as we asked questions more, discovered that a goodly portion of the public that was there, afraid of snakes, intellectually supported the project. As long as they didn't have to be involved in it. As long as they didn't have to be out on that island and encounter snakes. Most people thought that suddenly, if you were to go out there, snakes would be dripping off the trees. Whereas we're only going to release like 6 a year. And if in my own personal backyard with garter snakes, I can see 6 almost any summer day. So their concept of numbers and size of the island, they're going to starve. You're going to have, what are you going to feed them when they're out there? This is a big island. It's over 1,000 acres. It's not a little tropical island with a palm tree sticking in the middle of it. So the concept that people have conjured up has been very interesting. So we had this, and covered by the media. Here's people. You can see the expressions of concern on their face. These aren't supporters. Some of them, they're not necessarily opposed. Some are just trying to figure it out. But some of them are very opposed. They came that way. And I mean, one of them literally, who abuts the property, but several miles away to the edge, a couple of miles, has a sheep herd, and she is convinced that every one of her sheep will be killed if we do this. The rattlesnakes will come bite every sheep in her herd and kill it. Doesn't happen anywhere else. I mean, like I say, every state in the lower 48 except 2 has rattlesnakes. And you don't see about sheep kill-offs, in other parts of the country. It just doesn't happen. And actually, our rattlesnake, the timber, is one of the milder ones. If we had western diamondbacks or eastern diamondbacks, they're aggressive. These guys are fairly timid snakes. So here's some of the misconceptions. I'm going to have to keep moving here pretty fast now, too. Have they already been released? You've already done it, and we're just discovering it. No, we didn't release them yet. Will public access to Quabbin be further restricted? No, because the island we're on is already restricted. Will rattlesnakes spread off Mount Zion to other parts of Quabbin? And the answer is no. They're anchored to that hibernation site. If they do swim off and they don't get back, they'll die over the winter. So if it were to happen, those animals would be lost to the population. Since Mount Zion is an island, will the snakes run out of food? This is back to that palm tree with a little sand island concept. This is a huge island. In fact, if you're on it, you don't realize you're on an island because you can only see one shore at a time. So no, categorically no. Will rattlesnakes be brought from other states? In other words, a lot of people thought, we don't have any rattlesnakes. Where are you going to get them? They've been here ever since the Pilgrims arrived. They've never disappeared. They're rare as hen's teeth, but they've always been here. And we're using animals that are all from Massachusetts, offspring of parents from Massachusetts. Will adult rattlesnakes be moved to Quabbin further from other populations? No. The operative word here is adult. Adults are imprinted on their hibernacula. So if we put an adult out there, he doesn't know where his hibernacula is, but he's going to go looking for it. So that animal's going to wander and be lost to the population. So only young that have never imprinted on their own hibernacula. Is it true that the state plans to release 150 snakes? The Boston Globe created this out of thin air. I wish we had access to 150 snakes. We have 6 right now being raised. 6 versus 150. They were conjuring up these truckloads of rattlesnakes we're going to put out there. I wish we had access to 150. We do not. Whoop, I did it again. What happened here? The Legislative Oversight Committee hearing, just to give you an idea, the chair of this Natural Resource Committee, this is the Natural Resource Committee and some other invited legislators. This was being held in the Athol Town Hall, which is the northern tip of Quabbin. This is the Secretary of Environmental Affairs, the Commissioner of the Department of Fish and Game, the Director of the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, and me being grilled for 2 hours. I was grilled for an hour and a half of those 2 hours. You know, like, what idiot's idea is this? In fact, that was one of the comments that was in the press. What idiot's idea was this? And all kinds of media attention. And frustrating how the facts were correct. In very few cases, I actually was interviewed on air. Most of it was like this with a host, and that's a black-tailed rattlesnake from Arizona. Mostly they used western diamondbacks. And they were teasing them, making them strike the camera lens and that kind of thing. So it's just the sensationalism that comes with the press, which is really frustrating and unfortunate. Nobody ever gave us any problem when we decided to release eagles at Quabbin. I wonder why. It's just such a different public concept about one animal versus the other. We think we're such environmentalists, but we are still very biased. We don't like spiders, we don't like snakes, we like eagles and big megafauna more than we like, you know, insects and snails and other things. So we don't have this even attitude across nature. And so this is what we're fighting. One that's iconic and majestic, and one that's makes your skin crawl, basically. Now, do we take that into account, or do we be impassioned scientists and just look at which ones are native and are imperiled? Well, to the degree we can, we do that. We try to be unbiased as much as we can. But it's impossible to get away with being totally unbiased because each species comes with its own baggage. So, summary. They've always been in Massachusetts. We have 5 very isolated populations, 2 of which are on the verge of disappearing, and 2 additional, which would have been 7, disappeared in my career. Main populations are all in jeopardy at some level. It's the statutory responsibility of our agency to conserve all species, native species, including rattlesnakes. Population part of Quabbin already restricted from public access, as part of Quabbin is, serves as a safety net where we can protect them from the public. Not the other way around. The arguments are always coming, they're going to put us all in danger. No, they're already in your state parks. So now we want to put them in a place that the public can't get to them, so the snakes can be protected. Because of a limited availability of locations where they can hibernate and survive, they will not spread to other parts of Quabbin Reservation. They are anchored to their hibernacula. If they stray away and can't get back in the fall to their hibernacula, they will not survive the winter. Their presence in a restricted area poses no public risk and requires no change to the existing public access policies. This is being made a huge deal. The 2 fishing organizations, which normally are allies for our agency, are opposed because they just have been swearing we're going to close off boat access to the whole reservoir. We're not. There's no need to. They're not going to go swimming out and chasing boats. So there's no need to change that access. But they fundamentally have made it clear they don't believe us. So, 2 minutes over. I want questions if you have them. So this is not our normal bunny releases where everybody likes what we're doing. Yes?
We could pass around the microphone. Two quick questions. So I guess there are none in the Middlesex Fells Reservation. You mentioned the Blue Hills. And the second question is, does more than one snake live in a hibernation site?
Oh, yes, they're communal.
They're communal.
They're communal. In really healthy hibernacula, you can get 50 snakes. But I'll bet in Massachusetts there's not a one that has more than 10.
My question was, what is Mount Zion used for? People go to that island? Do people rock
All the
climb
islands
there?
are off limits for public access.
Oh, so no one would
all
ever...
completely off limits. Now, staff of DCR, the foresters can go out there, researchers can go out there, but even forestry, they do no forestry on the islands. So you got an island with no forestry, no public access, sitting there, and the snakes can't leave it and survive the winter. So even the island is going to have snakes, and the mainland won't. Public's on the mainland, they can't go on the island. If they go on the island, we're going to arrest them. I mean, state police will. So it looks like a no-brainer that it would be a great place to do it.
While I get there, I'll ask a question. What is the
so you want to pick them out? I'll let you select the...
what is the status of the project, and do you think you will succeed?
Say that one more time.
What is the status of the project? Do you think we'll...
What's the status of the project? Remember that public, legislative oversight committee meeting? They demanded we put it on hold until a study committee made up of mostly politicians and state officials can meet with a minimum of 4 or 5 public interest categories of public interest groups. So town officials, fishermen, hikers, chambers of commerce. People are afraid that we're going to give them a bad reputation by having them here. And we're going to start, unfortunately, we're not really being allowed to set this public forum process up until after the elections, so that it doesn't affect the electability of any of the politicians involved. And then hopefully this fall, after November, it'll get underway, and depending on how long it takes and what the outcome is, they'll decide whether they're going to let us do it or not.
Yeah, my question is, this isn't an opinion that I have, but it sounds like these snakes were already disappearing due to climatic changes before people arrived. So how do you argue, or how do you address the argument that maybe these animals aren't worth saving because they were already disappearing due to climatic change?
Yeah, I totally agree. If we had, well, actually, I don't. I started to say if we had a continuing cooling climate, which is not what we have, that they would eventually disappear. I would have given them another 3,000 years. So in the time scale, you want to give up on them because they only have 3,000 years left. And right now, frankly, the climate's turned around the other way. They're going to start moving up from the south. They're going to be everywhere again, not need these hibernacula. Well, the decline was artificial. Yes, the changes in climate over geologic period meant they could be here across the entire landscape the way they are farther south, and then it cooled down, and they can only be here now in specific sites. But there were hundreds of those specific sites. So whereas Massachusetts may have had them in 100 places, we now have them in 5. And so there were still 100 places. It was, we have a lot of other rare species that are less well distributed than that. So their disappearance is artificial. Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. The first, are you going to be head starting the snakes you release, or are you going to be releasing
that's what we're doing. We're taking wild-born, well, actually, we're often finding gravid females, i.e. pregnant females in the wild, bring them into Roger Williams Park Zoo, let them have their young. The young, for whatever reason, hang out and stay with mom, like you saw in that photograph, for about a week or 10 days before she leaves and they disperse. I have no idea if that's important or not, but we're letting them do it, because it might be important. And then we're keeping the young and head starting them, keeping them in captivity, keeping them in warmer temperatures so they have a very short hibernation period, which is physiologically important, but it's not the whole winter, and trying to get them to grow. We want to release them where they're about 1.5 feet or more long, and they're immune to most of those predators that could only eat the babies. But even as a big adult, there's predators out there that can kill any of them. But their survival rate goes from very low when they're small to quite high when they're big.
And then my second question is just from like a snake conservationist perspective. I know like Pennsylvania, for example, they're like way more common, and one thing that they do is they have like controlled hunting of the snakes.
They used to.
They used
They're
to.
not nearly as common in Pennsylvania as they used to be,
Right.
and they've closed that down.
Yeah, I just think that's ridiculous. I was just wondering from a conservation
Oh, yeah.
perspective.
Well, you know,
how you feel.
it gets into the basic question I think you're raising is, should we care about something that's rare here that's common somewhere else? And frankly, we don't have too many things that are just restricted to here or a small region in New England. Most of what we're dealing with is more common somewhere else. But as a state agency, it's our responsibility to manage our native flora and fauna. And so just because it's more common somewhere else doesn't change our legal mandate. If it's native here, if it's not native here, that's a whole other story. In fact, we might even aggressively eradicate it. But if it's native here, it's our responsibility to see we don't lose it.
Yeah. My question is regarding sort of education and public outreach. I believe the Museum of Science here in Boston has a timber rattlesnake,
They do.
actually. Yeah. So do you have, I mean, has there been any discussion of having like educational outreach to try to get the public to understand the value of the species and sort of understand why conservation is important?
Yeah, Museum of Science in Boston has had rattlesnakes for 40 years probably. The Trailside Museum in the Blue Hills, which is right there where we have a population, has had them for 40 years. We have a couple of private educators that we have permitted to have timber rattlesnakes. And it's interesting. I would say that most of the time this kind of education touches the choir. In other words, you're preaching to the choir. You're preaching to the people that already are on your side. The people that don't like snakes don't want to go over to the rattlesnake cage and look at them. I mean, some of them say literally if they look at it, they're going to freak out. I gave a program to a school, and one of the teachers came up to me and says, "Are you going to have a live one? If you do, I have a couple of students that say they won't be able to be in the room." And so, you know, the fears are, they're real. And I don't understand the whole issue of fear of heights and fear of spiders and fear of whatever, but they're real. And so we're dealing with a group of animals, snakes, and I would say venomous snakes is the top of that group, where there are people that are genuinely afraid. But so does that mean that we shouldn't be trying to manage them? I would say no. They're legitimate native species. But that is something we're fighting. It's a uniquely feared animal, feared by higher percentage of the population than any other group of animals. And most people don't fear one kind of snake versus another. They fear snakes. Most of them don't even want to look close enough to see what color the snake is, much less what kind it is. So it is an interesting phenomenon.
Sorry. Can I
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not following that.
Okay. Has there been any attempts to use artificial hibernacula to maybe monitor
We don't
them
need-
or help? I
Well,
don't know.
the question was, have we done anything with artificial hibernacula? That's been done in the Midwest with prairie rattlesnakes where hibernacula are a limited resource. We have some good hibernacula, especially on this island. I mean, this island not only has a good hibernacula we think was historically used, but it's completely off limits to the public, and it's large enough to be self-contained. So even if we go to other places where we have historic hibernacula, people are even more freaked out because they're not islands. You know, they're just some, you know, right behind the houses on Mount Tom, or, you know, Mount Tom has its own population. In fact, we have 5 remaining populations, and in 4 of the 5, they're so boxed in that every year a small portion come out into the surrounding neighborhoods. And so we have 4 different places we have response plans for how you go and deal with a rattlesnake in the backyard. And it's just that, you know, we are a really built up state, and all this development is built right up to the island where the mountain is. And if they come off the mountain, they're in someone's backyard under the swing set. We're dealing with that now. This is going to be so easy, completely off limits to the public, big enough for the snakes never to want to go off the island, out of sight, out of mind, and it's freaking people out, even though Mount Tom, Blue Hills, had been there so long that the neighbors are used to it. So it's just this is new, and people are just creating in their mind a sort of a horror film of snakes starting to spread and act very unnaturally.
Yeah, I have just sort of a more general question. So it's one thing to be involved in an argument where where either the facts are not clear or there are sort of facts that are supporting both sides of an argument, but there's many issues besides yours where sort of one side is a very emotional-based argument and one side is a very fact-based argument. Arguments around biotechnology and many of the things that have come up in presidential debates, for example. And so I'm wondering what you've learned about how to deal with that sort of where people are not really arguing with each other, but sort of across each other, where you have an emotional argument on one side and a fact-based argument on the other. What have you learned about that process?
Well, I'd already learned earlier in my career on other topics that science does not carry the day. Emotions carry the day more often than logic, if people have strong emotions about any topic. And part of my challenge is trying to figure out how to make the science of an issue be more uniformly accepted or more widely accepted. And if people have strong emotional feelings, oftentimes I doubt if there's anything that's going to change their mind. I mean, we're dealing with snake fears, and it could be spider fears, or it could be fear of height that are so deeply ingrained. I don't think you're going to get people that are really dealing with that to change their mind. Although I've been very surprised at how high a percentage of people that will tell me, I am freaked out by snakes, but what you're doing makes sense, and I support it as long as I don't have to have anything to do with it. And so those are a level of intellectual people that I really am surprised. I respect that they can separate those fear from the logic, but a lot of people can't do that. The fear is just overtakes logic. And that's when we get, literally, we get these arguments thrown out. We're going to put radio transmitters in the snakes because people want to have guarantee that we know where they are. So for the first 10 years, every snake release is going to have an implanted radio transmitter. They don't have any legs or tails to attach them to, so you have to surgically implant them. They can stay in for 2 years. We're going to take them out, replace them for another 2 years, and that's 3 surgeries to take it out, and so that's all you do on this animal. 3 surgeries per animal maximum. But that's a radio transmitter for 4 consecutive years in each snake we release. And so we'll know where they are. And already people have told me that we've already done it because they've seen the rattlesnakes in their backyard 10 miles from there. So we're going to actually put up on a website locations of where the snakes are so they can't suddenly argue, oh no, I saw one over here 5 miles away. So we'll say where they are. And the concept of making this acceptable, it's just going to be really hard for a lot of people to accept the fact we're doing something to help such an evil creature. People literally put these judgments on their, the evilness of them. But we've had people say they're going to contaminate the water supply at Auburn for all of Boston. How are they going to do that? They're going to poop. They're going to swim and poop. Well, you already have 1,000 Canada geese and gulls, 1 million fish pooping in that water. The toxins are going to soak out of the radio transmitter. Well, it's embedded in dental acrylic. They don't have any toxins in them, transmitters, and it's not going to be able to get out from swimming. Oh, they're going to drip venom into the water and make the water poisonous. First of all, they don't drip venom. They keep it. It's like, saliva. And if they did, can you imagine a few drops of venom in 1 billion gallons of water or whatever it is? So, the rationality isn't there necessarily.
Yeah, I just had one last quick question because I know we're almost out of time. But is there any plan once hopefully this gets underway to relocate the population to other hibernacula, or this is sort of just going to be an
we made it clear we want one safe place. We're not going to give up on the other 5. And they're going to be harder to work with than this one's going to be. But one safe place, we're done, and it's going to take us 20 years to accomplish.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, and see
Not
you
even
all
my
next week.
birthday. This is odd. Looks like I have a hole in the cup.
That's really great. Thank you. I just one more thought. So I was thinking about bees, right?
Bees?
People, yeah, bees.
Yeah.
There's this huge fear of bees.
Oh, yeah.